Welcome back to another video. On today's video, guys, I'm going to be doing a review on the new Gran Turismo movie. I don't have a lot to say. I made a lot of content yesterday, so I'm kind of back up to par with you guys finally. Go check out that content from yesterday. Yesterday was National Cinema Day, so I made a whole bunch of shorts and also a box office breakdown over the summer that was very, very interesting. So go check that out if you haven't. And go read the community post as well. I made an announcement yesterday and a poll, so if you haven't voted on it, please do so. And I think that's about it. That's all the announcements I have to make. Yesterday afternoon, I watched the new Gran Turismo movie, so yeah, let's just get straight on to the review. So, Gran Turismo. I believe I saw the trailer, probably like early summer, maybe a little bit before summer. I know it wasn't too long ago. It was fairly recent when I saw the trailer. And honestly, I had pretty low expectations for this movie. I'm not a big fan of racing simulator games. I was always more of a fan of like GTA and stuff like that, and you can still do racing stuff in there if you're really into it. But I'm not a big fan of just games that are strictly just racing simulator, just focused on that. I'm not that much into it. So Gran Turismo, which is a PlayStation-made game, which, like, I'm not a big fan of most PlayStation-made games anyway. I find them kind of boring, kind of generic, and things like that. So, not knocking on this movie or anything. I'm just trying to tell you how low my expectations were initially for this movie. Not really a lot of familiar faces or anything like that, other than David Harbour, who did make this movie look interesting from the trailer with some of his funny moments in that trailer. But yeah, just initially very low expectations. I was not as I was not as sold on the idea of a kid who is really into racing simulators, one of the best in the world, becoming an actual race car driver. Like, I was just as get the F out of here as David Harbour was in this movie. So yeah, and then the whole, based on a true story stuff, I take that with a grain of salt, because most movies, they take like one little element and that's what they, that's how they get the based on a true story. There's not a lot of actual relationship between the movie's point of view and what actually happened. It's usually not very closely tied together. It's very, very loosely tied together, and so I take based on a true story with a grain of salt, especially with horror movies that claim that they're based on a true story. I just take it with very much a grain of salt. So, yeah, that's how low my expectations were for this movie. But then reviews started coming out for it, with people saying that this is actually a really solid movie, a very, very good underdog story, and they really, really enjoyed it. And so I still kept my expectations low because I didn't want to overestimate it or anything like that and then end up being disappointed. I wanted to be surprised, because when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I wanted to see it. I was very, very curious, but I didn't think it was going to be a really, really great movie by any metric. So, yeah, I kept my expectations low, and thankfully I did, because I ended up really, really enjoying this movie. This was probably my favorite movie of the month, honestly, and this is my most... I watched the most movies in this month than I did in any other month. I watched more in this month than I did in June and July. I watched 5 movies each in June and July. I've actually watched 6 movies in the month of August. And yeah, going down the list, I think this was my favorite movie of the month, which honestly surprised me quite a bit. I really, really did enjoy this movie. It definitely surprised me, and I think it was a really, really great option for watching on National Cinema Day, honestly. Yeah, I thought this was a really solid movie. So I guess getting into the positives, I think this is obviously the obvious stuff, just to get out of the way, and I'm not going to throw this stuff into the negatives, so I'm just going to get this out of the way just really fast. I guess, we'll do the negatives first, and then we'll talk about the positives, just so that we'll change things up a little bit. First of all, is this movie formulaic? Yes. I mean, it's an underdog tale. It's going to go by it's going to play by the same rules, where you got to have, the coach of the underdog who missed an opportunity earlier on in life, and now he is trying to guide somebody else and not let them like not let them miss that opportunity that he missed, which would be David Harbour in this movie. And then you always got to have like ridiculous. How do you want to say it? Like it's always got to be the the enemy in this movie, the antagonist that we have to beat by the ending of the movie, in this final matchup or whatever, has always got to be a big jerk. It has to be like seem like all odds are against our underdog. Like there's no way he's gonna win this, but somehow he manages to sneak in the win or something like that. It's got you know what I'm talking about. It is formulaic, and it does follow the formula quite closely. So it has all of those expected cliches that you would get out of an underdog story. So I'm not gonna go on and on about it did this and the same old. It is definitely a underdog story through and through. It follows that formula very, very closely, and like the reason why I had my expectations low is because it was an underdog story and because it was saying it was based on a true story. In my mind, I was like, that's not a very good combo, because I'm telling you they're probably going to take that based on a true story very loosely and make it into some kind of underdog story, even though it really wasn't that impressive in real life. But actually, they followed the based on a true story subtitle very closely. There's actually, if you look at the story itself, there was actually a lot of similarities, and I feel like the actual story itself is a true underdog story, so it makes sense. I think it's warranted that all those cliches in there, because that is just what the story. That's how the cookie crumbled, basically. So, is it formulaic? Yes, but I don't think that's much of an issue for me in this movie. I don't think I have many other issues other than maybe the Danny guy, who is basically this marketing officer for Nissan, who comes up with the idea of taking the best Gran Turismo racing simulator players in the world and giving them a chance to be an actual racer. I think he's a little bit too into it, if you know what I mean. Like, David Harbour's like, no, this is a ridiculous idea. I'm going to show these kids that this is impossible. But then the Danny guy, like, truly believes in this, and he's like, no, this is not absurd. It's giving the power to the players. It's giving them a chance. I just think he takes it a little bit too seriously in this movie. I wasn't too big of a fan of his character, and I never understood why the higher ups thought that this marketing strategy was necessarily a good idea. I mean, I would be looking at this as a huge liability. This would be a huge, like, if something goes wrong, it is going to completely fail and make the company look very, very bad and make them liable. Like, it's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. So I don't know. The Danny character, I think he was a little bit extravagant at times with his idea. I still think the idea is really, really ridiculous. It's ridiculous that this actually did happen. So yeah, I wasn't too big of a fan of his character. I thought, like, the only problem that I had with the underdog story cliches was having to make the antagonist or whatever, the one of the top dogs that they're gonna have to match up against towards the ending of the movie, always has to be a big a-hole. And in this movie, they really, really pushed on that, with him being kind of a sore loser at times and things like that. And I just didn't think it was very necessary. I didn't really think they had to follow, like, go off of that so much. I don't know how to word it, but I just didn't think it was necessary. I think they should have just stuck with the underdog tale, just focused on the growth of our protagonist and not really worry about making us want to defeat this other guy. We just want the protagonist to be successful and make his dreams come true, basically. And then I think lastly, for the negatives, the love interest whole side of the story didn't really interest me at all. I didn't really think it had much of a purpose. We get a little bit of it at the beginning of the movie, before he enters the GT competition. And then we get some more of it, like, towards the back half of the movie, and I don't know, they try to develop on it more, but I don't really care. He has, like, this love interest in this movie, and I don't know, I just don't think it really served much of a purpose in this movie. So I think those were the main negatives for this movie. I don't think I really had any other issues. Maybe going into the mixed category, I think that this movie might have been just a little bit too long. I think they could have shed off a few minutes here. Maybe if they wouldn't have focused on the love interest story a little too much towards the back half, maybe that would have shortened it up a little bit. I'm not saying that this movie was like too long or anything like that, but I think if they would have focused on more things, I think they could have used their time more wisely, but I think they were wasting time with things that they didn't really need to, and so I'm complaining about the time because I feel like it was a little bit too long because they were focusing on things they didn't need to. I know I'm explaining this stuff in really complicated ways, but that's pretty much all I have for the mix. So finally getting back to the positives, which we were going to talk about first. I think just overall, to just summarize it, I think that I do like underdog movies. My favorite movie, personally, I don't think that this is the best movie made or anything like that. There's a distinction between what I think is the best movie ever made and what is my favorite movie. I'm a big fan of the movie. It's one of my personal favorite movies from my childhood. I'm a big fan of the movie Real Steel, which is very much a underdog story. Not super popular or anything like that, but that's one of my favorite movies. And as a kid, I always loved those underdog stories and things like that. But now that I've matured more, I'm like, not all underdog stories are that good. Most of them are formulaic. They have a lot of cliches and things like that. And so that's why I was very doubtful about this movie, especially with the concept of taking a video game player and giving them the chance to basically bring the video game to life, and then they have to actually do that. Just seemed like a very, very, dumb concept. It's just like, they're not going to be able to do it. But I think that they actually managed to make a very, very good underdog story. Like, there's those, like, B-tier underdog stories where they're not very good, but you enjoy them because by the ending of the movie, you are rooting for your underdog and you are cheering for them and things like that. But it's nothing that you haven't seen before. But this, I think, is an A-tier underdog story. I think they did a really, really good job. I liked our main lead in this movie, Jan, I believe is his name, Marin Barreau or whatever. I really liked him. I thought the actor did a really good job. I liked David Harbour in this movie, who was sort of the coach, the mentor in this movie. I liked how at the beginning of the movie he was very, very doubtful, and then they grow his character, and he finally starts to gain trust and starts to believe in this character and doesn't want him to give up, even though he has a bit of a downfall towards the back half of the movie. But he tells him, don't give up. Don't just walk away like I did when I had the chance. Are you going to finish this race? Don't miss out on this opportunity. I thought that was a really, really good thing that they did, and something that was a little bit different. Most underdog stories, they all play out the same way. They're very, very predictable. But I think that was something a little bit unique about this movie that I really, really liked. I think they developed that the coach character in a way that is a bit unique and is not super formulaic, like much of the stuff in an underdog story. So, yeah, I think that, like I said, most underdog stories, I enjoy them, but they're very much B tier. They're not great by any means. They all follow the same formula, but they're still enjoyable just because everybody likes underdog stories. They like the feeling of, I could do that. I could have the chance. I could be that guy who once was just, thinking of being the world champion, and now here I am, I'm standing on that podium. Everybody likes those underdog stories because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel like they could be that person who could take the chance and go all the way. But most of them are B-tier movies. They're not great because they all follow that same formula. But I would say that this is an A-tier underdog story. I really, really enjoyed it, and it really, really did surprise me. One last thing I almost forgot to mention, as far as video adaptation goes, I think they did a pretty good job. I actually like that they focused more on the underdog story itself than they did on making it a video game adaptation. I know many people, they wanted to see that video game adaptation out of it because they are a big fan of the Gran Turismo games. But I was more interested in the underdog story itself, the true story, whatever you want to call it. And so I wasn't too concerned about them making it seem like they were in the actual video game. There were things that they did here and there during the races, which, by the way, the races were really good. The racing sequences I really enjoyed. and especially the final race, which was like a 24-hour long race. Very, very long, very, very grueling. Lots of ups and downs. I really, really liked that final race. But yeah, as far as like, video, like how closely it adapted to the video game, they kind of sprinkled some things here and there in the races to try to make it seem like you were in the video game, having the voice and thing in the background, having things on the screen here and there that show like, what's your gas level, what's your tire level, whatever, you know what I mean? Like all the HUD stuff, they put on the HUD stuff on the screen to make it seem like you're in the video game. But one of the unique things that they did, that I really liked is when the main character Jan mentioned that when he gets zoned into his game, he's kind of just like, oh, it's just me, everything's so slow, and it's like I'm just behind the wheel and all that. Like he has this sort of, when he gets super zoned in, he starts to get really, really relaxed, and he has this sort of feeling during the race, and I really liked how they did that in I believe the final race, and I believe they did it one other time too, where they kind of showed that feeling that he gets during the race, and they kind of showed like him back at home, and then like the car forming around his computer screen and things like that, and him just sitting on his computer chair or whatever. And then at the final race, his dad's like in the background as well, and they repeat a scene from towards the beginning of the movie. I really, really liked that. I think that was one of the better things they did. So if you're one of those people who is concerned about like how closely it adapted the video game, they kind of sprinkle things here and there to make it feel like you're in the video game for those people who are a huge fan of it. But I would say that they tried to follow the underdog story, the based on a true story, more than they were focused on making this a full-on video game adaptation. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case you guys were curious. And then one more thing that I would like to mention is that I really, really liked the story arc they did with his dad. With him, it is kind of cliche, I guess you can say, where the dad doesn't think that he can make a career out of something that he's very, very passionate about. He really wants to do racing, but his dad's like, it's too dangerous, you can't go anywhere with this. And much like David Harbour, who's the coach in this movie, he starts to believe in him more towards the ending of the movie and gain trust in him and become as passionate as he is in what he wants to do, which is racing. And so it makes for a very, very great moment at the ending of the movie where he's standing on the podium and he's hugging his dad, who's crying. I believe he was crying. It's just a really, really emotional and just heartfelt scene. I really, really like that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Rotten Tomatoes, I gave this movie a 4.5 out of 5 stars, which I think is pretty generous now, going over a few of the negatives and the mixed stuff that I had for this movie. But I think I will stick with that. It didn't bother me so much. And so, honestly, Gran Turismo, I think I will give a solid 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed this movie from start to finish. Had a few issues with it, but this is absolutely, to best summarize it, an A-tier underdog story. This is one of those better underdog stories, not just a B-tier underdog story that you've seen many, many times before. This is one of the better ones. And so, yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Stay tuned for future movie reviews. Not a whole lot in the month of September. It is kind of a slower month for movies. Same with October. I mean, it's mainly just horror movies and things like that, so there's not a whole lot of variety. So, yeah, it's going to be a bit of a slower month next month, but I know for sure I have Saw X, and I believe there was, like, 2 other movies, I believe, but I can't think them off the top of my head for some reason. But yeah, we'll have some other content. I'll find something to do in the meantime if I don't have any movie reviews to do. So yeah, just stay tuned for future videos. I'll try to upload some shorts, try to think of some rankings to do, because I know I haven't been doing a ton of those, and I know there's a lot that I could do. So yeah, I think that's it. Like and subscribe, guys, and I will see you next time.